London, a city of old shadows and modern thrills. Martin, a young student, found himself caught in its intoxicating embrace one Friday night. The pubs of Soho beckoned with promises of forgetfulness and fleeting connections. He drank deeply, chasing away the anxieties of exams and the lingering loneliness of city life. Hours melted away like ice in a summer rain. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of blurred faces and echoing laughter. When he finally stumbled out of the pub, the early morning light was a rude slap in the face. Disoriented and nauseous, he collapsed onto a nearby bench. Sleep, heavy and dreamless, claimed him. When he finally woke, the sun was high, painting the city in unforgiving clarity. He groaned, his head throbbing in time with the city's pulse. Reaching up to rub his aching temples, he felt something different, something alien on his shoulder. A small bite mark, red and angry, pulsed beneath his fingertips. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of his hangover. What had happened last night? He couldn't remember, couldn't recall anything after his third pint. Fear, a sour taste in his mouth, mingled with the remnants of cheap beer. He had to get out of there, had to get home.
The next few days passed in a haze of packing and nervous anticipation. Martin pushed the memory of the bite to the back of his mind, choosing instead to focus on the upcoming trip, Delhi. The very name conjured up images of vibrant colors, exotic spices, and the warm smile of Vinay, his friend and confidant. They had shared secrets, dreams, and desires through the digital ether, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Soon he would see Vinay again, feel the warmth of his embrace, explore the bustling streets of Delhi by his side. The promise of their reunion eclipsed the nagging worry about the bite, the fear receding like a nightmare banished by the morning light. The flight to Delhi was a blur of stale air, cramped seats, and fitful sleep. Martin couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes boring into him. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the fabric of his shirt chafing against the bite mark on his shoulder. It itched with a vengeance, a relentless burning that demanded to be scratched. He made his way to the cramped airplane bathroom, the fluorescent lights doing no favors to his already pallid complexion. Splashing cold water on his face, he caught a glimpse of his reflection. His eyes, usually bright and full of life, seemed dull, shadowed with a weariness that went beyond jet lag. The bite mark pulsed angrily, a fiery red beacon against his pale skin. He couldn't resist the urge any longer. His fingers, trembling slightly, reached up to scratch the itch, the sensation sending a jolt of electricity through his body. He felt strange, different. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he gripped the edge of the sink for support. What was happening to him? The Delhi air hit Martin like a wall, hot, thick, and teeming with 1,000 unfamiliar scents. He gasped, momentarily disoriented, the cacophony of the airport washing over him. He felt lightheaded, his skin clammy despite the heat. The bite on his shoulder throbbed in time with the city's pulse. Vinay's face, a beacon of familiarity in the swirling chaos, materialized before him. His smile, warm and welcoming, eased the tension that had gripped Martin's chest. Relief flooded through him, washing away the anxiety of the flight, the lingering unease from the bite. He was here, finally in Vinay's city, in his embrace. The drive to Vinay's apartment was a whirlwind of color and sound. Auto rickshaws weaved through the traffic, their horns blaring a discordant symphony. Street vendors hawked their wares, their voices a rhythmic chant against the backdrop of Bollywood music blaring from nearby shops. Martin felt his senses overload, trying to process the sheer intensity of it all. Vinay's apartment was an oasis of calm in the heart of the city, cool, quiet, and filled with the scent of sandalwood and spices. Martin collapsed onto the bed, his body heavy with exhaustion. He closed his eyes, letting the sounds of Delhi lull him into a restless sleep. The next morning, Martin woke to the tantalizing aroma of spices. He sat up, his head pounding slightly, the events of the previous night a hazy memory. He was in Delhi, with Vinay. The thought brought a smile to his face. Vinay greeted him with a grin and a plate piled high with potato and pea-stuffed parathas, a traditional Indian breakfast. The bread, crispy and flaky, gave way to a savory filling that exploded with flavor. Martin ate with gusto, his appetite returning with a vengeance. They spent the day exploring the narrow, winding lanes of Chandni Chowk, Delhi's oldest and busiest market. The air was thick with the scent of incense and spices, the streets a riot of color and sound. Martin marveled at the sheer variety of goods on display, from glittering saris to intricate silver jewelry. As the sun began to set, they made their way to the Jama Masjid, one of India's largest mosques. The mosque, built of red sandstone and white marble, towered above them, its domes and minarets silhouetted against the twilight sky. The call to prayer echoed across the city, a haunting and beautiful melody. Despite the beauty and excitement that surrounded him, Martin couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The bite mark on his shoulder, though no longer itchy, throbbed with a dull ache. He felt a strange restlessness, a primal energy coursing through his veins. He found himself inexplicably drawn to the animal exhibits at the Delhi Zoo. The sight of the caged animals, their eyes filled with a mixture of boredom and desperation, filled him with a strange sense of kinship. He lingered the longest at the owl enclosure, mesmerized by their silent, predatory grace. Their eyes, glowing in the dim light, seemed to follow his every move. That night, as they sat in the Hard Rock Cafe, surrounded by the familiar sounds of Western music and laughter, Martin felt a growing sense of unease. The full moon, a silver disk hanging low in the sky, seemed to exert a strange pull on him. His senses felt heightened, his vision sharper, his hearing more acute. He excused himself, his heart pounding in his chest, and made his way to the bathroom. Splashing cold water on his face, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the mirror. His pupils were dilated, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. His face seemed thinner, his features more pronounced. Panic welled up inside him. What was happening to him? Terror gripped Martin's throat. This wasn't him. This couldn't be him. His reflection stared back, a stranger in the mirror. His face, normally smooth, sprouted coarse hair, a beard erupting with unnatural speed, his fingernails lengthened, sharpening into claws before his very eyes. He tried to scream, but only a strangled gasp escaped his lips. His teeth, his own teeth, felt wrong. Too big, too sharp as they pushed against his gums. His jeans, already tight, ripped with a sound of tearing fabric as his body contorted, muscles growing, shifting beneath his skin. The smell hit him then, the stench of his own fear, but laced with something else, something primal, something wild. He slammed his fist against the mirror, the glass cracking under the force of the blow. He didn't recognize the creature snarling back at him. His howl, deep and guttural, echoed through the bathroom, the sound of a predator unleashed. He slammed the bathroom door open, a wild beast bursting into the crowded Hard Rock Cafe. Screams, a cacophony of terror filled the air as Martin, no, the beast, burst into the restaurant. He drank in the scent of fear, the primal urge to hunt, to kill, surging through his transformed body. His eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, scanned the room, settling on a group huddled together, their faces pale with terror. He lunged, his powerful legs propelling him across the room with impossible speed. His claws ripped through flesh and bone with sickening ease. Blood splattered hot and metallic against his fur. He tasted his first victim, the coppery tang of blood igniting a frenzy within him. The screams intensified, a chorus of terror as the diners scattered, their attempts at escape futile against his inhuman speed. He was a whirlwind of teeth and claws, a force of nature unleashed upon the unsuspecting restaurant. Tables overturned, plates shattered, the air thick with the stench of blood and fear. The Hard Rock Cafe, once a haven of Western comfort, transformed into a scene of unimaginable carnage. Bodies, mangled and broken, littered the floor, a testament to the beast's brutal rampage. Driven by a hunger that could never be sated, the werewolf, no longer recognizable as Martin, crashed out of the restaurant and onto the crowded streets of New Delhi. The night air vibrated with the blare of horns, the shouts of street vendors, the cacophony of a city teeming with life, but to the beast it was a symphony of prey. His senses, heightened beyond anything humanly possible, picked out the scent of fear, the pounding hearts of potential victims. He lunged, his powerful jaws clamping down on a passing rickshaw driver. The man's scream was cut short as the beast tossed the rickshaw aside and leapt onto a passing delivery truck. He clung to the roof, a monstrous gargoyle against the backdrop of the city lights. Below him, chaos reigned as people scattered, their screams echoing through the narrow streets. He spotted his next target, a young couple huddled together, their eyes wide with terror. With a guttural roar, the beast leaped from the truck, landing before them with a bone-jarring thud. Their screams were music to his ears, their fear fueling the fire that raged within him. He was no longer Martin, no longer human. He was the monster, the predator, and the streets of New Delhi were his hunting ground. The India Gate loomed ahead, a stark silhouette against the moonlit sky. Tourists and locals alike thronged the area, their laughter and chatter echoing in the night air. The beast, perched atop the delivery truck, inhaled deeply. The scent of so many humans, so much potential prey, sent a thrill through its primal core. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the city, the beast launched itself from the truck, landing squarely in the midst of the unsuspecting crowd. Panic erupted, a wave of human terror washing over the plaza. Screams pierced the night, the sound both exhilarating and sickening to the beast's ears. It moved with a speed that defied logic, a blur of teeth and claws, reaping a bloody harvest. Limbs were severed, throats torn, bodies tossed aside like discarded rag dolls. The air, once filled with the sweet scent of jasmine and street food, grew thick with the coppery tang of blood. The India Gate, a monument to peace and unity, became a charnel house, its once pristine grounds stained crimson with the blood of the innocent. The beast, drunk on carnage, reveled in the terror, its howls a terrifying symphony of death. The sirens wailed in the distance, a discordant counterpoint to the beast's symphony of destruction. The Delhi police, alerted to the carnage unfolding at the India Gate, raced towards the scene, their faces grim, their fingers hovering near their holsters. They arrived to a scene straight out of a nightmare. Bodies, mutilated beyond recognition, littered the ground. The air hung heavy with the stench of blood and the raw, primal fear that clung to the few survivors huddled in terrified groups. And then they saw it. The beast silhouetted against the moonlit sky, its fur matted with blood, its fangs bared in a silent snarl. It stood atop a mound of bodies, its eyes glowing with an unholy light, a creature of nightmares made flesh. Without hesitation, the police raised their weapons, their fingers tightening on the triggers. A volley of gunshots shattered the night, the sharp reports echoing off the surrounding buildings. The beast roared in pain and fury, its massive body riddled with bullets. The world spun, a dizzying kaleidoscope of pain and confusion. The beast, its lifeblood seeping onto the pavement, collapsed to the ground, its limbs twitching involuntarily. Consciousness flickered in and out, each moment a torment of agony and bewilderment. Then darkness, a heavy, suffocating darkness that swallowed him whole. When Martin finally regained consciousness, the first thing he registered was the smell. The pungent odor of urine and feces, the musky scent of animals, the sharp tang of disinfectant. He tried to open his eyes, but a blinding headache forced him to shut them tight. Where was he? What had happened? He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy, unresponsive. Panic welled up inside him, choking him with its icy grip. He was restrained, his arms and legs bound tightly. He struggled against the restraints, his fear mounting with each passing second. A low growl rumbled deep within his chest, a sound that sent shivers down his own spine. He remembered the carnage, the screams, the blood. But it was like watching a horror movie, a detached observer to the atrocities committed by what? Whispers of truth. The whispers started slowly, fragments of sentences, snippets of conversation that drifted through the bars of his cage. He strained to make sense of them, his head pounding, his thoughts a jumbled mess. Werewolf, Delhi, bloodbath, monster, werewolf. What were they talking about? He was Martin, a student from London. He wasn't a monster, was he? The memories came in flashes, vivid and horrifying. The transformation, the bloodlust, the taste of human flesh. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the images, the guilt, the shame. He was in a cage, he realized, a cold concrete enclosure reeking of animal waste. He could see blurry figures moving outside the bars, their voices muffled, their expressions unreadable. He tried to call out to them, but only a dry croak escaped his lips. They thought he was an animal, a beast that needed to be contained. Little did they know the truth, the terrifying truth that clawed at the edges of his mind. He wasn't just an animal, he was something far more dangerous, far more monstrous. He was a werewolf. The bars of the cage felt cold and unforgiving against Martin's skin. He lay curled in a corner, his body a mass of aches and tremors. The events of the past few days swirled in his mind, a chaotic maelstrom of blood, fear, and the guttural roar that still echoed in his ears. Had he made that sound? Was it possible that the bloodthirsty monster was him? He looked around his prison, his heart sinking with each passing moment. The air hung heavy with the stench of animals, a mixture of musk and fear that made his stomach churn. Through the bars he could see other cages, each housing a creature he couldn't quite make out in the dim light. They paced restlessly, their shadows stretching and contorting like phantoms in his already fractured mind. He tried to remember, to piece together the fragments of his shattered memory. The flight, Vinay's welcoming smile, the vibrant chaos of Delhi's streets. They seemed like distant dreams, remnants of a life he no longer recognized. In their place remained a terrifying emptiness, a void filled with whispers of blood and bone. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he closed his eyes, willing himself to wake up. This had to be a nightmare, a cruel trick played by his subconscious. Any moment now, he would wake up in Vinay's apartment, safe and sound, the horrors of the past few days nothing more than a fading bad dream. But the nightmare wouldn't recede. Instead, it burrowed deeper, worming its way into the darkest recesses of his mind. Flashes of memory, vivid and horrifying, assaulted him. The transformation, the searing pain as his bones shifted, his teeth elongated into razor-sharp fangs. The taste of blood, metallic and hot, igniting a primal hunger that could never be satisfied. He saw the faces of his victims, their eyes wide with terror, their screams echoing in his ears. He felt the sickening crunch of bone beneath his jaws, the warmth of their blood splattering against his fur. Each memory was a fresh wave of nausea, a crushing weight of guilt and self-loathing that threatened to drown him. He had become the monster under the bed, the boogeyman lurking in the shadows. He, Martin, a lover of books and quiet evenings, had transformed into a creature of the night, a predator driven by a primal bloodlust he couldn't control. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him gasping for air in the stifling confines of his cage. He remembered the gunshots, the searing pain that ripped through his body as he fell, the world fading to black around him. They had shot him, tried to put him down like the animal they believed him to be, and in that moment, lying broken and bleeding on the cold pavement, a part of him had welcomed the oblivion. Days bled into nights, each one a torturous cycle of pain, confusion, and the slow creeping realization of what he had become. The zookeepers, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, brought him food and water, their eyes never meeting his. He was a spectacle, a freak show attraction to be gawked at from a safe distance. He learned from their hushed whispers that he had been found near the wolf enclosure, his clothes shredded, his body covered in blood that wasn't entirely his own. They assumed he was an escaped animal, a dangerous predator that had gone rogue. They couldn't comprehend the truth, the monstrous reality that lay hidden beneath his human facade. And as the days turned into weeks, a terrifying acceptance settled over Martin. He wasn't going to wake up from this nightmare. He was a werewolf, a creature forever caught between two worlds, forever teetering on the edge of a primal abyss. He watched the full moon rise each night, its pale light casting long, eerie shadows across his cage. He could feel the familiar pull, the stirring in his blood, the primal urge to hunt, to kill, rising within him. He knew that the next transformation was only a matter of time, and with that knowledge came a chilling certainty. He might be caged now, but the monster wasn't gone. It was merely biding its time, waiting for the opportune moment to break free. The days stretched on, each one an agonizing reminder of Martin's dual existence. The man and the beast forever entwined in a macabre dance of horror and despair. He watched the zookeepers, their faces a constant reminder of the terror he instilled. Their fear, a palpable thing, hung in the air between them, a barrier he could not breach. He yearned to explain, to scream his innocence, to plead for understanding, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain the unexplainable? How could he rationalize the bloodlust that pulsed beneath his skin, the primal hunger that gnawed at his soul? He was trapped, not just by the bars of his cage, but by the monster that lurked within him. A monster that was both him and not him, a dark passenger that had taken the reins of his destiny and steered him towards a horrifying unknown. As the sun dipped below the horizon each day, casting long, ominous shadows across his cell, a cold dread settled over Martin. The full moon, a harbinger of his transformation, loomed closer with each passing hour, and with it the terrifying certainty that he was losing the battle for his soul. The night of the full moon arrived, cloaked in an eerie silence. The usual cacophony of the zoo, the roar of lions, the trumpeting of elephants, the chattering of monkeys, was strangely absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness that pressed in on Martin's chest, stealing his breath. He felt the change coming, a slow, inexorable tide of primal energy rising within him. His bones ached, his muscles spasmed, his skin felt too tight, as if it couldn't contain the beast that strained to break free. He slammed his fists against the bars of his cage, a roar building in his throat, a mixture of rage, fear, and a desperate plea for help that would never be heard. The zookeepers, their faces ashen in the moonlight, backed away slowly, their eyes wide with terror. And then the transformation began. His vision blurred, his teeth elongated, his nails sharpened into claws that scraped against the concrete floor. The world around him dissolved into a kaleidoscope of scent and sound, every sense amplified, every instinct honed for the hunt. He threw back his head and howled, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the still night air, a chilling testament to the monster he had become. The beast was loose, and everyone in Delhi was in danger.